sama waa ji nag yaa ngi bëgg a yàgg ci dëkk bi sa holiday yi gudd na lool sax.
vacances yi yàgg na waaye dama ne naa ñibbisi ci sama réew. investir.
wax nga dëgg sa saafara man maa ko yor jóge ñu dem topp ma.
ci sama waaj da ngaa bëri pexe de topp ma.
xam ngeen Gambia léegi dafa open. loolu moo waral global properties jóg. jaay la kër doo manqué courant doo manqué ndox da ngay am pool maanaam piscine sa disposition di nga am beach bi sécurité 24 hours. te soo bëggee investir aussi nga mën a investir sa réew jënd kër di ko louer. hôtel yi na xam baax na waaye nag am na gan yoo xam ni dañoo bëgg bu ñu ñëwee ci réew nekk à l'aise. nekk ci bërëb boo xam ne dañu am seen waañ bu ñu bëggee togg seen lekku dëkk dañu am seen salle bu mag am seen néegu bopp am seen lépp loolu yëpp ak global properties mën na nekk.
jërëjëf def leen ni man ñëw leen global properties ngeen jënd seeni kër aar seen ëllëg ak bu seen njaboot.
Are you a resident of France or its surrounding countries and still wondering how to send your packages to the Gambia? Or your properties got lost or have delay anytime you send them? French Touch is here to solve your problem. French Touch sends all kinds of goods except what cannot be fit in container. They don't only stop at sending, but they also sell goods like fridge, mattresses, good quality carpets, furniture and many more.
Inata bullo jora on la karola o fanan kenna ma be wiye cemento bije adadi ma na kenna ma ñunu man dangali o dambam fanana de ikamoto ki anin ka wafi nin dadi ma fanana ñun tuma yesandiro kenyilma ika wafi ma konopal ime batandi dunu sikala ye dokulal so do miliyan ko sobe yata bake ifon le kela bakaso samba fela la bungo kono French Touch fela sabateri ngale kiti sila bala kan gunjur birkama highway ise ka chanyo ya nino ninyi nombala alkami jeskiri.
Esteemed media practitioners, you are invited here to update you on the stage of our presidential campaign and where we are to go from here. Our campaign to eradicate poverty, injustice and ignorance is not simply an idea. It is a demand of time and circumstances. It is therefore significant to update you on the prospects that exist regarding the answering to this call of destiny, not only by our candidate, but by all the custodians of the political process. We are here to tease out what gave rise to the demand, the means utilized to address it, the various positions of the political forces, the convergences, the divergences, the basis for coalition building, and the way forward. Esteemed media practitioners, the march of history has brought us to this stage. The Gambian people were the spectators of history prior to 18 February 1965, when we attained limited right to self-determination and independence. On the 24th of April 1970, we attained full right to self-determination and independence and to be the architects of our own destiny. Ignorance delayed the process of empowering the people so that they could take charge of their destiny. Eventually, in 1994, the Republic was abrogated and the sovereignty of the people became a casualty, even though it was limited sovereignty. By 1997, the sovereignty of the Republic and the sovereignty of the people were again restored. But because of ignorance, there was delay again in the assertion of the authority of the people until the 2nd of December 2016, when power conceded to the demand of the people to take ownership of their own country and determine who should govern their affairs on their behalf. This is where the course of history started to take a new turn. The objective was to give Gambia a new start, to ensure that by force of example of leadership, the hopes of the people will be rekindled for a fairer and better Gambia. And by creating the institutions and instruments to ensure that fairness and that better Gambia, despite the poverty and the pain of injustice and ignorance, the people will steer the nation forward towards a brighter future, not only for this generation, but for a generation yet unborn. I must say that the Barrow administration has done its best. Our position is that its best is not enough to eradicate the poverty, the ignorance, and the injustice that had been inherited from the past and will continue to exist irrespective of goodwill. Economically, we have a GDP of about 108 billion. It is anticipated that it will rise to 115 billion in 2022. But if you calculate that in economic terms, this is pittance and cannot really sustain the demand of our population for better lives. The services that are being rendered are inadequate. And you have a revenue base of about $25 billion for 2021. This is anticipated to rise to 29 billion. But if we examine the revenue base, it comprises domestic revenue and grants. So combining the grants and the revenue is what gives rise to the 25 billion. So the actual revenue base, excluding the grants, is about 13 billion, and the grants 12 billion. So they are almost equivalent, showing a real dependent economy. And the grant base, you have project grant of about 8.8 billion and budget support of 3 billion. So if you see development taking place, you will see that part of it is from your tax money and part of it is from grants. And if you look at the tax base of the economy, almost 13 billion is coming from taxation and only 1.5 billion from non-tax revenue. So essentially, there is no sovereign national wealth that can facilitate the development of the country. The country is entirely dependent on taxation and grants. So this grant, tax, and debt-based economy is not sustainable and cannot eradicate the poverty of our people. And this is why DOI is calling for system change, the transformation of that base. because Gambia is a rich country. We have abundant natural resources, arable land of 550,000 hectares. They're only cultivating about 327,000. We can produce all the rice we need to consume, and it is measured about 200,000 tons. We're producing only about 57,000 tons. We have a national development plan, but you do not see anything being said how that national development plan, short-term, medium-term, long-term, could lead us to food self-sufficiency. There is no investment program that could lead us to that food self-sufficiency. No investment program for import substitution so that we'll be able to generate what we need to consume. And therefore, not only provide what we need, reduce what we are spending on importation, but also provide the basis for employment in the country. This is why PDOIS has made it very clear to the population that this country and its young people have no future under the First Republic, Second Republic, and the current dispensation, because no effort is being made to ensure the expansion of the productive base of the economy in order to sustain the human beings that are now demanding for better lives. Over 500,000 children are coming out of our school system every 12 years. What do we have for them under an economy which simply is actually measured What is this? Well, I'm sure the whole world is listening to us, but I'm getting hands from there. That is confusing the whole situation. I don't know what is happening.
I think it was they thought that there was an issue with the microphone, but it's resolved, so it's all right. We'll see.
Well, let it be known that the fault is not on my side, but technical fault. So essentially, what PDOIS is promising the Gambian people is to move away from a service-based economy that depends entirely on taxation and introduce services supported by the productive base of our economy. Look at our ocean. It can generate all the wealth that we need. And that wealth from our minerals, from our ocean, from investment in the productive base, from our public enterprises, would actually be deposited at the central bank, and we'll have a cooperative bank as well as an investment financial facility to be able to sustain the expansion of our earning capacity and the capacity to eradicate poverty. An investment capacity, a financial facility, will enable us to support, for example, our Navy. Currently, the Navy is designed to ensure security in our territorial waters. But that could only be done with financial backing. And the country currently depends more and more on assistance rather than being able to sustain such a Navy. We are saying that that Navy will have a security component, but will also have a productive component, where there will be trawlers designed to fish, land fish on our territories and ensure that we generate employment and expand our export of fish and therefore increase our earning capacity of foreign exchange, which will enhance deposits in our central bank into that financial facility that will continue to generate more and more investment. Some people say that PDOIS is against the private sector. We are saying we are not against any productive base that we inherit. Rather, the private sector in the Gambia is weak, its contribution to the tax base is very minimal, and therefore what it needs is to be properly guided, because we have up to 1.6 billion being exchanged in the banking system without any sign that it is coming from or going back into the productive base of the economy. So in that regard, the promise is that a DOI administration will strengthen the private sector that is productive and that is genuinely in the national interest, and would in fact form a partnership with some of them, not only for the Gambian economy, but for an economic of scale, to be able to ensure that we export into the sub-region and we have services in the sub-region which has roots in the Gambia. So we will examine all the potential of all private sector producers and look at the economy they are serving currently, and if they can expand into the West African market, expand into the African market, and further afield through collaboration with other African companies, we will ensure that that is facilitated. So the private sector has better capacity to grow under a DOI administration than any other administration that has ever existed, because there is no sovereign national wealth, no investment capital in our central bank that will be able to facilitate such partnership and also give support for an economic of scale in the sub-region and elsewhere. We are capable of eradicating poverty by creating a sector in the bank for cooperative banking, which is interest-free loans, because you have investment facility to be able to make profit, and that profit is resiphoned so that it supports interest-free loans to be able to eradicate poverty. We are able to ensure that the 550,000 hectares that our people currently cannot cultivate to ensure food self-sufficiency will actually be given primary focus, so that we produce what we eat, not only what we eat, but also what we export, to be able to earn the foreign exchange necessary to be able to cushion our development. It is important for us to show very clearly why DOI is different and why it's talking system change. 56 years we have seen, all Gambians, that going to a village, and we have gone to those villages very recently, it is like they are in the Stone Age. We fought for independence to control our land. We fought for independence to eradicate the poverty of our people. We fought for independence so that the people would take charge of their destiny. But today, the poverty remains, the alienation remains, and the suffering remains. We have to explain why. Parties will say the prices of rice should go down, the price of oil should go down. How? If you are still importing the rice, importing the oil, and you have to incur the cost of importation, how can you reduce the prices? What control do you have over those prices? It's either you create the scarcity of goods or high prices. This is the trajectory Gambia is locked in. We can only change those prices by producing the rice, which we can, and we'll show you how, produce the oil, which we can, produce the tomatoes, which we can, produce everything we are consuming, the butter, the yogurt, the eggs, everything we are consuming, we can produce, because we are blessed with the environment and natural resources to be able to do so. People have no capacity to produce now because they do not have the financial wherewithal. So companies will come from abroad, go to the people in the villages, sign contract with them, and rely on them to be able to produce banana on their soil with their labor in order to export it, in order to make wealth at their expense. Is that why we became independent? And that is the policy of many political parties since independence. The commercialization of agriculture is not designed to empower our people to produce more. so that they can sell more and earn more. It means handing over our land to others who have the financial wherewithal to invest. Because the people cannot go to banks to take loans because of the high interest. We are saying that is not pre-designed. It is created by policy. Policies that are poor. So our problem is the poverty of policies. And that is what we intend to eradicate. That is why we are saying we are going to have a cooperative bank that will give fertilizer, seed, and farming implement to farmers without interest. They will go and expand their production to a commercial level, large-scale farming, large-scale family farming, and sell their produce. And there too, we will have a cooperative marketing system that is not designed to exploit that farmer. By looking at the market differentials, we will ensure that the farmers are protected from that exploitation so that the world market price will actually serve their income generation rather than serve the interests of others. That is what we intend to do. So in that regard, we are convinced that through the cooperative bank, we can help the farmers to have what they need to be able to produce all the inputs, but at the same time, by protecting them from any form of exploitation, they'll be able to earn more. So we expect then the farming community to be enriched by that policy. And by so doing, the environment will change in two ways. There will be community development and there will be household development, because if their earning capacity increase, their household will earn more, and therefore their housing system will also change. We'll have rural housing system just like you have Social Security and Housing Finance Corporation, which was designed to establish low-cost housing for workers who contribute to that fund. We are going to make sure that the farmers also will contribute to a fund so that they can have low-cost housing in the rural areas. We will expand the community-based development plans. How are we going to expand it? There is simply no effort to create any structure, financial structure, to be able to finance village development. You have village development committees everywhere. But a village development committee without a financial base can never bring about any form of development. So we are saying that each village must have a financial structure. There must be a village treasury, and our position is that these 56 years of getting people's rates and licenses paid for certain facilities like shops, which goes to the area council, has been a wrong policy. The policy will rob the villages and will not give them any form of development. No water, no electricity, no roads, no health center, no facility that you could call general welfare. And the purpose of a government is not only to be entrusted with authority, but to use that authority to promote the general welfare of the people. So we are saying that we will institute a new system of local administration or regional administration. First and foremost, all those funds that are coming from the villages will be deposited in the village treasury for village development. Where will the regional treasury get resources, or district treasury? Well, that's what sovereign national wealth is all about. Today, every person in this country by head contributes to the national budget because of indirect taxation. Every importer will pay duty, excise at the customs. But in selling the product, what is paid will have to be added to the price of the product to recover what has been deposited at the level of customs. So indirectly, everything that you buy, you are actually contributing to the national coffers. At the moment, that tax base is ensured by our collective contribution. But how do you share that so that there is mutual benefit? We must apply the law of proportional development, balanced and proportional development. And it means then that you distribute that wealth to the regions proportionately, and those regions will now complement development in the villages, distributing it to the district in a proportional way so that they will complement development in the villages. With that balanced development, if a particular village wants to provide water, fencing to women gardeners, it will be able to have a project and then cost the project and determine whether the village treasury will be able to finance the project. If that cannot be done, then it means that the district treasury should come to the aid of the village treasury, the regional treasury will come to the aid of the village treasury, and it's the same thing with the national treasury will always come to the aid of the village treasury in terms of equalization grants to ensure that there is balanced and proportionate development of society. We have answers, but you have had political parties controlling national government and local government for 56 years. But where is really the solution to rural poverty? The architecture we have as our manifesto is finally what is going to bring about the system change that will eradicate the poverty of our people, where there will be community development and household development complementing each other to ensure that the people live better lives. Esteemed media practitioners, we are simply introducing how we intend to change a system which for 56 years kept our people in abject poverty. It's not predestined. We are capable of eradicating it, and we will eradicate it with the support of the people. But as we can see, there are many political forces seeking the mandate of the people. In that regard, it is important to examine the nature of these forces in order to prepare the ground for convergences or divergences in our political architecture. What is very clear is that there was a split in the UDP, creating what we now have as NPP and UDP. We do have the APRC, but here too we can see a split in the party. What it will emerge to be, we don't know, but they have been drivers of the political process. We have the GDC, there had been splits. Well, it is a driver of the political process. And we also have what you call PDOIS as part of the drivers of the political process. So these parties had in 2016 emerged to be drivers of the political process, and were expected that in this 2021 presidential election would have been contesting for the particular seat. But undoubtedly many parties have come on board. How they are going to align themselves, we will still guess. But what is important is that we have a political landscape where many forces are at work and many efforts are being made to see how to converge their efforts in order to build coalitions. The lesson. Coalition 2016 cannot be replicated. Coalition 2016 came as a result of the situation that we had in 2016. There was just one dominant political force. All the other political forces were marginalized, and the citizenry had no hope of change. And therefore, we had to build hope by showing that we can build the mass base that could effect the change that the people wanted. So it started by bringing together presidential candidates so that through unanimity, they will select one among their number to be the presidential candidate who all will support, so that we can address the problem of incumbency. That is how it started. When convergence came in terms of selecting a flag bearer, but differences in terms of who should be selected, then we went to the second phase of involving all the political parties in equal number to actually select one. Whoever is selected, all will agree to support the person regardless, so that we can effect the change that was necessary. That is how 2016 came to be the year of transformation of a different type, transformation through the ballot box. On that day that the election results were declared, the Gambian people must have come to the realization that power really, truly belongs to them. And that is why we insisted during the impasse for that power to be maintained, that electoral legitimacy to be maintained, that constitutional legitimacy to be maintained. And it was maintained. A new Gambian should have been born, a Gambian fully conscious that their power and voice will determine their manner of government. And together, they are responsible for the destiny of this country. Whatever happened, they cannot abdicate from responsibility. Now, we are faced with a new situation. That change had come through the ballot box. But many people are saying the change has not brought them what they had designed for themselves. That is why we talk about regime change. It's a change of government. But what people are now demanding is a change of a system to ensure that their poverty, any injustice, their ignorance would actually be eradicated. Those forces who recognize this could come together to be able to salvage the country. But bringing people together just for a change of a regime at this moment will be an abuse of our population who are demanding, the population who is demanding for that change to really come about. A change that is meaningful, a change that is purposeful. So in that regard, DOI's position is that we will not be part of any coalition just for the sake of changing a face. We can only be part of a coalition whose fundamental aim is to eradicate the poverty, the injustice, and the ignorance of our people. That's number one. Number two, that coalition building could come in two ways. Fundamentally, it could come through unanimity by those who intend to stand but have the same objectives to really select among their number the person who should actually lead in that regard. The issue of electing a flag bearer is something that DOI is still wary of by virtue of the experience of 2016. Because we do not want anymore to be held responsible for failure. We must therefore negotiate with maturity so that we prepare for success rather than failure. We must ensure that what happened in 2016 does not happen again. That is our fundamental objective. So therefore, we are ready to negotiate with all partners with one condition, that we will not allow any possibility of 2016 being repeated again. The Gambian people own the Gambia. Their voices and their power will determine the future of our country. The information they receive and the conviction they have will determine the type of politics we are going to have and the quality of our politics. Power belongs to the people, and power consists to no one without a demand. That is what our leaders have always taught us. So therefore, if the people are to concede, to entrust their power to anyone, it is their duty to demand what is necessary for them to live in liberty, dignity, and prosperity. They should not demand anything less. They must demand for the eradication of poverty. They must demand the eradication of injustice. They must demand the eradication of ignorance. If they demand any less, then they are subjecting themselves to be spectators of history rather than the architects of their own destiny. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hand over to the chair. Could you take all this thing to the chair.
Testing. Testing, Asa. Testing. You can hear me. Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That is the conclusion of the statement by the presidential candidate. So now the floor is open for questions. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That's the conclusion of the statement by presidential candidate Halifa Sallah. The floor is now open for questions, and I would like to have each one of you, just to tell each one of you that if you are called upon to ask a question, please state your name and also identify the media house that you represent. So we will start with the first question, please.
My name is Landin Sisi. I'm from Ketfad. My question is, Mr. Sallah, you just returned from a nationwide tour, spreading the word of system change, eradicating poverty and ignorance. From 1 to 10, how would you rate the message that you are disseminating to the people? How people are taking it, how people are consuming when you are spreading the eradication of poverty, ignorance, and injustice. 1 to 10, and why do you think that your message is well heard by the citizenry? And then the second question is, how do you see the Gambian people readiness for a system change that you have been advocating? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. One thing that was very resounding everywhere we went was that I did not need to try to convince anyone. I believe those people who were part of our caravan would affirm that. They said that during the impasse, there was not a single Gambian who was not listening to you. And by virtue of that fact, we are convinced of your sincerity. That became very clear, and I think those of you who followed all the meetings we had, there was not a single meeting where the actual statement was not made by one person or the other. So in that regard, one must say that already I have the advantage of being visible to the whole nation before the caravan tour. Secondly, we explained very clearly the reason for the poverty of the villages. Why they don't have electricity, why they don't have water supply. And there is not a single elder who denied the fact that their villages have never had a village treasury. And the simple explanation that we gave was that a household cannot survive without money for the day. So every household must have an income to be able to sustain the household. But how can a village exist without money to sustain the village? So we must say that by explaining that all villages should have village treasuries became a profound statement that all villages accept. So I must say then that the people do accept system change. We've also told them the reason for their poverty, that why is there a differential between the price of groundnuts in Senegal, the price given by Chinese companies, and the price given by companies in the Gambia. And obviously, they could see the difference. And the explanation is that the world market price is the same. Why the difference then? Of course, they are being shortchanged one way or the other by those who are buying their nuts. And we're saying we are out to protect you from this. Thirdly, we've also explained to them. For example, we were in Sanja. The women produce a lot of tomatoes. They cannot sell it. They have no market for it. We explained very clearly that you should have a country where what you produce is actually processed by the country. Because we are importing tomato paste and producing all these tomatoes. And we can clearly produce tomato paste. Why don't we invest in the industry that can produce that tomato paste? And that means that the women will be saved from what is actually happening to them, the rotting of their tomatoes. So in short, we are convinced that the Gambian people are convinced that system change is in their interest, especially when we talk about the cooperative bank. We are convinced that the message is clear to people. It is how far the message has gone so far, and how long we will have time to be able to ensure that every single Gambian clearly understands the message. We are convinced at this time that we are being heard, and we are happy that we are welcomed by the population who believe that we have the sincerity to solve their problems. Secondly, there was a second question, which...
like Gambians' readiness.
Well, what we can see from the interaction with the population, when you get down to shake their hands, they almost wish to, I will not say break it, that will be a negative statement, but if you are not studied, I don't think you'll be able to survive the real pressure that comes from the people, and it's the pressure of love, which has no pain. In fact, it has the joy of the heart, and that is an indication that people are showing readiness for change.
Okay, the next question, please. Can you please state your name and which media house you represent?
gis nañ ñu la nit ñi teeroo ak waxtaan bi nga xam ne seet na ko waaye laaj bi nga xam ne moom rek laa laaj benn laaj képp la mooy ci biir loolu gis nañ ne nit ñi ñi ngi ñëw di la wuyu si ci woote bu yàgg bi nga xam ne yàgg nañ koy woo mu mat ci ay at ci ginnaaw nga leen di woo ci li nga xam ne moo di soppeeku doxalin ak li nga xam ne mooy ndóol ak li nga xam ne mooy ñàkk bu ñu mel dafa mel ni léegi bi ñu demee ci tool bi gis nga nit ñi ñi ngi waaj di la wuyu si ci li nga xam ne mooy woote bu yàgg bi nga leen di woo waaye li ci am mooy dafa bii moo nekk sa mu jënteel yoon bi nga xam ne dina jomante li nga xam ne moo di xëccoo njiitu réew wala benn xëccoo bu ñuy am ci biir Gambie ma bëggoon a xam tey jii bu fekkee dem nañ li nga doon wut antuwul ak ni nga gisee nit ñi ñu ngi dox di la ko wutalisee ndax loolu doo xalaataat décision bi nga xam ne jëloon nga ko keroog bi ngay janoo nit ñi si sa congrès bi si sa
jërëjëf ci laajte boobu ci jaaxle bi réew mi nekkoon yàgg nañu di jéem a woote ba dugg sax ci coalition gis nga ci coalition 2011 ne demoon naa sax ba mënoon naa taxaw pour ñoŋante pour nekk presidential candidate waaye dama ko bàyyi woon ñeneen ñi nga xam ne ndax maa woote woon dajale leen ma gis ne du mandute nga woote ba pare dal di jiite géew ba mu mel ni dama waxoon ne du ma ca bokk te ñeneen ñi sax dañ foogoon ne dama leen doon nax ci jamono jooju loolu yëpp pour dimbali nit ñi ñu xam ne place bii du place yi liggéeyukaay place bi dafa nekk place yi jox àq sa réew ne doomu réew mu nekk dafa am àq ci réewam doomu réew mu nekk dafa war a pare benn waxtu boo xam ne di nga simmeeku nga pare pour sonn ndax sa réew mun a jëm kanam jox gannaaw sa bànneexi àddina ndax sa réew mun a yore bànneex booba loolu soo ko xasee def am nga ndam mu mel ni loolu nekkoon na suma jubluwaay moo tax 2016 gis neen wote ba nam demee mënoon naa jóg mer ne waaw ni ngeen doxalee affaire yi du noona ndax yéen ñëpp a ko déggandoon ñi ci bokkoon yëpp gannaaw gi ñoom seen bopp ñooy wax ne pexe mii lañ defoon ndax ki toog tey wane nag ñun jamono boobu dañu gisoon réew mu xaajaalo ne soo bàyyee réew moomu ba mu tàkk lu yàqu bokk nga ca bon nag soo ca mënee def dara baax na nga def ko ca moo tax man nangu woon dogal booba ñàkk bokk ñàkk xëccoo ba nga xamee ne tànn nañu ka nga xam ne moom lañ tànnoon fi mu nekk nii itam man am naa yaakaar ne li ma def ci National Assembly jàngit ba fa nekk ak ña nga xam ne nit yi doy la ñi fa nekk mun nañoo continuer liggéey boobu ci National Assembly mbéem su fekkee ne ma nekkuma fa te fekk léegi-léeg ñu sayante ndax nit soo demee ba xam ay yëf te yow ñu ngi bokk ak yow léegi-léeg ca gannaaw mun nga leen a sàcc li nga xam ne des nañu ko xam mu mel ni toll nañ foofu foo xam ne jaratul may ut place ci National Assembly ndax liggéey ba ma fa waroon def yaakaar naa ne def naa ko ba pare ci liggéeyi président itam li ñu leen a wax nii leer na lañ ne ñàkk ngi ndóol gi nekk ci réew mi noteel gi nekk ci réew mi mun nañ ko fee génne amul benn doomi Gambie fi mu nekk ku dégg wax ju ñuy wax nga ne wax ji day neen la mënut a ne kenn mënut a dàggeek ñun xaaral ba ci presidential debate bi du am benn koo xam ne kii taxaw na presidential vote koo xam ne kii ñun dinañ jàkkaarloog moom ñun ñu wax liñ nar a defar réew mi mu teggi ko loolu mun naa leen koo dig suñ ko mënee teggi rek boobu man suma bopp naa resign ne nekkaatuma candidat bon ñun am nañ lu wër loo xam ne lii amul kenn ku ci am ñaari xel ne lii mooy li réew mi soxla waaw suñ ko waxee nit ñi ba pare nit ñi ne fi mu nekk nii de ñun parewuñu te man itam toll naa foo xam ne wax dëgg soo ko seetee def naa li ma mun yëpp li war rek ma noppalu dal di dimbale ñi nga xam ne ñooy niti doy yi ndax ñu mun a am ci suñu biir ñoo xam ne ñi liggéey boobu dinañ ko mun a continuer man ma nekk elderly statesman nga xam ne léegi-léeg mun naa leen a jaaral loo xam naa leen de su ma demee ba nga xam ne taxawatuma di ngeen am làmmeñ bu tal ci suufi Gambia waxatuma ne di ngeen am nit koo xam ne njëréem naa kii nekk président de Gambia ci jamono jooju ndaxte du ma toog di ko seetaan muy def lu ko neex waaw mu mel ni boobu moom dig naa leen ko ne di ngeen am baat boo xam ne ci suufi Gambia dara du réerati te lu nekk dinañ ko sañ a wax waaw loolu moom dig naa leen ko waaye nag maa ngi wane ne bii mooy suma mujjantali taxaw pour ut place président loolu la ñuy wax sax ñi nga xam ne ñooy samp coalition ne man li maa joxe pour wàllu coalition mooy li ñoo ooyee ci anglais one term presidency taxaw rek benn yoon de duma taxawati waaw ku def coalition ak ñun na nga am garantie ne am nga one term président su ma jeexalee du ma utati président so incumbency amul ñaareel bi itam an inclusive government mooy government boo xam ne dina xëcc ñëpp ñu mun a tabax Gambie bu bees loolu ñu pare nañ pour def man pare naa pour def loolu ñetteel bi itam pour génnee incumbency nga toog ci nguur di jëfoo alali réew ma di jëfoo doole réew ma pour mun a pareyaas pour toogaat wala ku la jege mu toog boobu day man wane naa ne dinaa fexe loolu du am ne su ma toogoon mbéem nit yi doy kiy utaati président na nga xam ne aw ma farfarloog yow de te xam naa ne loolu xewoon na ci Mali ci Alpha Konaré nit yi parteem yam mere ko lool ndax moom daf ne du farfarloo kenn loolu nag loolu lañ war a continuer si soo ne pareetuloo pour nekk one time président ngaa nekk da ngaa pare itam ne soo ko nekkee ba pare te fekk ñi lay isi ay coalition la bon doo amati benn façon yi parparloo da ngaa emale ñëpp ñu ut réew mi ku ko jot rek baax na waaw loolu de dig naa ko réew
Please state your name and which media house you're from.
foreign newspaper. And Mr. Salah, talking about innovating economic system in the Gambia. So I want to know, why do you think we were the best alternative to the existing president, knowing the fact that unemployment opportunity is very huge in the country, and how do you intend to tackle that issue?
Well, thank you very much. I think that is the key issue. You cannot have a people with power to determine their destiny, and you keep them poor and helpless, hopeless. That is why we talk about the economic structure that we are going to put in place. The economic structure is meant for a country that has gone through this colonial experience, where we do not have industries at the time. And therefore, we do not have a strong economic base to be able to have what you call consumption-based welfare. What has happened in many countries in Europe, by virtue of the fact that they benefited from the colonial experience and they could build industries and generate employment for their population, therefore those who are unemployed, the state will accumulate a lot of tax resources to be able to at least provide some fund for those who are unemployed. So even if you are unemployed, you'll be able to have unemployment benefits. But in this country, there is no possibility of unemployment benefits. So all these hundreds of thousands of young people are depending entirely on the extended family, and that is why many people definitely must be seen to be callous, to say that, well, they are just drinking attire, they are aimless, and just insult them day in and day out. If you understand what they are going through, the congestion in their homes, what really poverty is all about, the insult they are even receiving from their parents, and that is why many of them at the end of the day will prefer to go and die in the Mediterranean Sea than to stay at home, because the insults become unbearable. And you come to a point where you don't even sleep. You hear people call banylang, that is, people don't sleep at night. They have nowhere to sleep. You'll go to a home, you are above 15, 16, and you find out the parents are just living in one living room. So some do not even have a bedroom. Some a bedroom and a living room. For how many children? 8 children, 9 children. So you see that most of those children will have to sleep outside. And in that regard, they become very vulnerable to the pressures of influence in doing anything that could be destructive to their lives. So we are not dealing with an ordinary situation. And I think people underestimate the type of poverty that exists in the country. I was a social welfare officer. I knew these young people. I worked with them. I went to their homes. I saw their conditions. You know, they explained themselves to me. So I've lived their suffering. So I know. That's what pushed me into politics. I could not bear that suffering anymore. I knew about it. I wanted to effect change. But when I started working there, it became so real that I had to work for change. Otherwise, I'll be the biggest hypocrite on earth. So in that regard, I am emphasizing to you that our economic policy is to build sovereign national wealth. And we have made it very clear. Our ocean can yield the type of resources that we can put in the central bank to be able to have a cooperative bank. And the cooperative bank, it is already happening with the women, what you call osusu. You put your part, the other put part, you put it together, and you give somebody some capital which has no interest to be able to invest. That's what cooperative is all about. We are saying that the state is a cooperative. We own the Gambia. We own the ocean. We own the land. It's a cooperative. That's why we talk about the cooperative state. It's a cooperative. So since we own it, we each must be empowered by that state so that we can be productive. For the farming community, we are saying we'll give you seed, fertilizer, farming implement, interest-free. For somebody from GTTI and you want a milling machine, you want to mill the coos into flour, the cooperative bank will give you a milling machine so that you can work and you just simply pay interest-free. Somebody who wants to sell that coos or who wants to have a bakery, whatever you do in the chain itself, you'll also get the resources to be able to buy and sell and pay back without interest. So that is the aspect that is aimed to eradicate poverty. Not only that, we are also going to build a productive state that will continue to build industries that will continue to process our goods in order to generate employment. It started with GPMB. GPMB came to a point where it could even produce soap. So it means that it could produce oil, it could produce soap. And therefore, expanding that production will increase capacity to a point that we do not have to import the oil that we are consuming. That will generate employment. We don't have to import the soap. That will generate employment. And with what you have, you can reinvest into other sectors, tomato paste, etc. That's how industries expand. But if what you generate in income is actually siphoned, it means that you could not have an investment base. We are saying at the central bank, we'll be depositing all this that comes from public enterprises, and that will serve as investment capital to expand the productive base of the economy and generate more and more employment. We can produce all the butter, all the cheese, all the yogurt, everything that you see here that we go in a shop to buy, that is a productive base for our people to produce. So yes, we can generate as much employment as possible. Not only that, because we do not have consumption-based welfare in the country, we intend to introduce it in another way, through a national service, to ensure that at a given level, once you finish the 12th grade, we introduce a national service where you look for skills in any quarter or knowledge, and for 1 year, the state will be responsible for your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and what you need to keep yourself clean and healthy, so that at least you start to build up a base of national unity, eradicate crime of all sorts, and inject a sense of love of country and people in those young people, and they will be able to be the people who will produce the type of architecture we need for another Gambia. Not only that, we are saying the army will be changed in nature. I've started saying that the army will be a productive force because it's a mighty force. You cannot just create it as a war machine. We have no war to fight. So what we need to do is to transform that army into a workforce with skilled personnel who will be able to build our wharves so that we can have river transport. We'll be able to build roads, we'll get all the machinery, they will build the roads, they will build the public buildings, etc. So they will develop all sorts of skills. And therefore, when they leave the army, they can go anywhere to utilize their skills in civil domain. So in short, we have an architecture that will get every Gambian working in one way or the other.
How will the PDOIS-led government sustain a cooperative fund, considering the nature of our economic system? And finally, I would like you to tell us your perspective regarding your encounter with the UDP in Basel.
Well, okay, thank you very much. In terms of our perspective of coalition building, we have said it. And of course, this is a period of consultation. I'm sure we are involved in part of those consultations. So there is no doubt that consultation of one sort or the other is taking place. Because if you are a presidential candidate, you may wish another presidential candidate to support you, and you may go and consult that person. So consultation does not necessarily mean that you've coalesced. So it is a process, and I believe that the processes of consultation is on. What the ultimate consequences will be evident to all members of society, as every consultation that will lead to coalition building must also be accompanied by some form of a memorandum of understanding that will be signed in public and known to the public. So I'm not aware of any memorandum yet signed in that regard, but I am sure consultation is taking place. Number two, you've emphasized the cooperative bank. Well, even before you transform society, we've told you that you are having a revenue base of 13 billion with grant of about 12 billion with a 25 billion budget prospect. So you are aware, I'm sure, that this year the government tried to create a project to really support households, and over 800 million was spent on rice, oil, and sugar. Well, imagine 800 million. You mean that cannot be put at the central bank and say that, well, we will utilize that money at least to give seed, fertilizer, and farming implement to a certain number of people so that they will produce without interest? Because you are giving them the 800 million as a gift. You mean you cannot give them that 800 million to produce without interest? I think you can see the rationale. So therefore, if you can go and give aid, which is gift, but this is saying direct that to production, let it be in the form of farming implement, I believe that is very practical. And we are not only talking about this small, tiny economy. We are saying investing in our mining, investing in our ocean, in order to generate more income, to ensure that that income that is generated will go into the central bank in two ways. One part is meant for cooperative banking to eradicate poverty, interest-free loans. But the other part is an investment to make profit, internally and externally. So therefore, the profit that you earn from the investment finance of the bank will be utilized to cushion whatever losses may arise out of defaults in the cooperative banking system. Well, I hope that you can understand very clearly that the cooperative banking system is definitely the only way that we can rely on to eradicate the poverty of our people and get our people to be productive and working. If anybody has another system, well, we are open to debate. And you can challenge all these political figures to come and debate how they intend to eradicate the poverty of our people. So the third aspect is, well, something happened in URR and people should not see it as UDP doing. When it was happening, we were there. Most of us did not know even what was happening. This is an individual case with a group of people belonging to a party. And of course, when a person wears a party attire of any sort, when something happens, they will talk about the party, they will associate the party with it. But this is an isolated incident. It does not reflect a conflict between UDP and PDOIS. And that incident is a matter that in actual fact could be handled by the Inter-Party Committee. I am the co-chair of the Inter-Party Committee. Of course, I've been away for a long time by virtue of an illness, and then immediately I have to concentrate on my presidential candidature, otherwise my party will decide something about me. So therefore I had to concede and work as quickly as possible to merit the decision they have made to select me as a presidential candidate. So in that regard, I have not functioned as a co-chair. Mr. Nyasa has been functioning very well, but the Inter-Party Committee is operational, and I would believe that if there is any individual problem between a party supporter or even a party member with any other group, that they will resort to the Inter-Party Committee to solve it as quickly as possible. And that's what I envisage. But it's a matter that happened in Wuli, if that's the incident you are talking about, and the actual MP for that area was left entirely to handle the matter, and he has not come back to me to say he is incapable of handling the matter. But if the incident you are talking about is meeting the UDP and then fraternizing or sororizing with them, to be more gender sensitive, you know, clearly we have that as the architecture for peace in the country, that all Gambian people own the Gambia, and we are all trying to get mandate from their authority. So therefore we cannot alienate those people who, in that regard, our duty is really to unify those people and allow each to choose as they wish. That is the democratic ethos. We are committed to it. We have said it in our manifesto. We will not in any way punish people for not supporting us. We will serve those who support us. We will serve those who oppose us, because they are the Gambian people who own the wealth of this land and deserve the service of everybody. So that is our position, that the people deserve service and we'll give it to them.
Seneca.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so, Honorable, we just want to know PDOIS's position on the TRC recommendation that has been postponed and then postponed indefinitely. So we want to know whether the PDOIS government will come to power with privatize that recommendation. And then the second one is, we have some news that Jahadumwe would be the standard bearer of PDOIS. Could you please clarify this? And if you want, I can ask the other thing.
Yeah, go ahead. You can ask any question.
Okay, the third question is on corruption. Because the current government have failed in implementing the Janet corruption recommendations. We want to know as well whether the PDOIS government will implement those Janet corruption recommendations. And then the last and the final one is, we also want to know, we at Gainapo, we are very concerned about manifestos. We want to know the update on your manifesto. Are we, the media houses, going to access the manifesto, meaning your contract with the Gambian people?
Thank you very much. We'll start with the last one. The intention, we wanted the presidential candidate to defend the manifesto before people like you, after you have access to it, and also before university students. But as I have rightly said, because of illness, it could not have been done when it was supposed to be done. So it is being scheduled. We had to go to the caravan tour and give that a priority to become visible in the political space. What is essential now is to ensure that we do precisely that. So before nomination, we will have in one hotel or the other a program where the presidential candidate will come with a published version of the manifesto where all will be able to have access to it and then engage in being, let's call it, in the hot seat to defend what DOI intends to do in 2021, if it actually is given the mandate of the people. So that is how transparent we will be. And I'm sure we'll invite you to represent Gainaco, or maybe they will send somebody else, I don't know. But we'll make it public. So number two, you've asked the question, TRRC. Well, don't you think it's a contradiction to say that the recommendations are still at bay and that we give our view on recommendations that do not exist at the moment? I don't think that is a fair question because it's a hypothetical question. Although I can say very clearly that the objective of setting up the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission was to emulate what happened in South Africa. And clearly, what was happening in the Gambia should have been guided by the experience of that country. What have they achieved? If I were to be the head of a government, I can assure you that the first thing I would have done is to look at those people who are actually the victims and ensure that they come into contact with those victims who were in South Africa so that they can exchange notes about what actually happened to them and how they managed to heal. And if they move through that, then you must hear, it's not only hearing from the TRRC, I would have wanted to hear from the victims, how they can ensure that reparation and reconciliation. It's more the voices of the victims I will listen to than the voices of anybody else. So apart from the facts that are gathered, the fundamental objective is healing. And healing is personal, is psychological, is the individual. So I would take a totally different approach. After the facts are gathered, of course that is the approach that is taken. But thereafter, what happens next? Clearly, I would have taken that particular responsibility, and whatever recommendation come from those victims is what is worth implementing. Number three, you raised another issue. Yeah, anti-corruption bill. You see, people have said that the National Assembly has wasted time. They have, in fact, been accomplice of corruption by not hastily passing the anti-corruption bill. You see, people don't know how the National Assembly functions. The National Assembly has powers, and powers to pass bill is one of them. But the executive has powers. The powers to speed up bills or to leave the bills in the hands of the National Assembly to scrutinize. The first process, if the executive wants a bill to be hastened, they introduce the bill under a certificate of urgency. Within 24 hours, the bill is passed. And it becomes a matter that goes to the executive for signature. I think you've already seen that process in the National Assembly. But when a bill comes and it is not under a certificate of urgency, it is passed on to a committee. And the committee start to scrutinize that bill, clause by clause. And in scrutinizing it, they invite experts to come and give their opinion on this. And sometimes it's a whole volume of experts being taken. And it can go to other jurisdictions. It can take as long as you may think in order to do the scrutiny. Because at the end of the day, the bill will be entirely different from what the government has introduced. And I believe that aspect also has been seen in some of the bills that came to the National Assembly, where almost all the clauses had some form of editing. So in short, the question is understood. But if the executive wants the bill to be enacted by the National Assembly or to be passed by the National Assembly within 24 hours or rejected, then all they need to do is to withdraw the bill and introduce it under a certificate of urgency, and you will have the bill in as law.
So it's like the current government doesn't have interest in that.
No, I'm not drawing any conclusion. I'm just telling you processes.
Okay.
That the process, they may not know, they may know, I don't know the knowledge base that they have. But now you have the knowledge base, not only a knowledge base, but this has been implemented. We have advised quite a number of ministers that if they want anything to be speeded up, all they need to do is to introduce it under a certificate of urgency.
So I mean, when the PDOIS government, what is the PDOIS government going to do about that? Now you are in government, let's assume. So the bill is already at the National Assembly.
Obviously, we'll get the national. If you elect me to be a president and I have a cabinet, obviously, I've already told you, we already have the knowledge base. We'll just simply withdraw that bill if it fails to pass before then, and introduce it under a certificate of urgency. We'll review it. Well, the Jana Commission, again, this is a commission. A commission of inquiry is not a court. And what is given are recommendations. So you have to review those recommendations to see whether if it is challenged in a court of law, it will stand the test of time. So we have said very clear that we will establish an expert bank. I recommended that to the incoming president then, incoming President Barrow. And all of you had heard it before the December Christmas celebration. I recommended that we should have an agency for sustainable socio-economic development, and it will comprise at least 7 people with the capacity in all areas of government. And then their duty will be to establish a database of experts on all core areas of development. And therefore, before the actual assumption of office, they would have looked at what is existing, what could be developed in the short term, medium, and long term. But of course, that never materialized. So obviously, if I were a president, that is the first task that will be done. You'll create experts to look at all this that had been inherited and see the merit of everything that has been said and take decisions that are in the interest of the nation.
Thank you.
What is always important is to know that we are moving towards the future, and we must learn from the past to shape the future rather than live in the past. Thank you.
I just need a clarification.
Okay,
So
Yes, landing.
my last question was in
What is that question? Well, is it fair to be using a person's name about any issue without going and interview that person and know what is really in his or her mind? Yes, that's what I'm saying. You can hear, I think you're a profound thinker and a seasoned media practitioner. Information by itself is yet to be news. It's information that you actually confirm to be truth that becomes the news. But information that is not confirmed is rumor. So you are asking me to confirm a rumor when I'm having a press conference saying that I'm the presidential candidate of DOI. Is the presidential candidate of DOI who is holding a press conference here? Is that not enough fact? So the presidential candidate of DOI is addressing you. Or do you doubt that?
No, it's okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes. I don't know whether Madam will sideline again.
Oh, did I sideline you? I think you asked a question.
Yes,
you asked a question.
Okay,
Yes, you've asked a question, so give someone else a chance, please. And I'm looking at this line up here, and I think, let's see, Gambia really has a huge representation here. And I think some of the people from Gambia TV has asked questions, or was it one person who asked the question? It was one person, I believe. And then Kirfatu, I don't believe that we've had anyone from Kirfatu.
No, you have. You just now. Yeah.
Oh, okay, you had one from Kirfatu. Okay, so what about Musuke by Joe?
Oh, yeah.
I'm here.
No, she wants to ask. She asked.
That was what she's written here as from Gambia Times.
Yeah, but it's a camera.
I'm here. Oh, okay. So do you have a question? No. Okay, so I don't know why they wrote your name down here. Fatima Lasagna.
Is that present?
Can I just take the next question, please? Someone who has not asked a question yet.
Okay.
No more questions?
Yeah.
Okay, then proceed.
Okay, I just need clarification. On my way here, I received a text message from a friend informing me that, Honorable Khalifa Salman is announcing, his resignation as a National Assembly member. So I just need clarification whether this is true or not, because I just received the message while coming here.
Well, have you been following the news?
No, I don't know. But
No. Don't answer me even. Maybe I should not ask you a question. You have to be firm and defend your profession. Say that I asked you a question. Answer it. Okay, I will answer your question. Honorable Usman Sile is here. I was ill for a while, infected with coronavirus of the worst type, which I will narrate later to show how I escaped from my contract of death with coronavirus. I refused to sign the contract and became alive. Essentially, I went to the National Assembly for the first time, and the surprise was that they made me the Speaker of the National Assembly for the day because of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker were absent. Didn't you watch that?
Yes, I watched that.
Well, why are you asking about resignation?
This one is saying that you will be announcing your resignation as National Assembly member today to run for presidency. That's the message.
Haven't you seen people running for presidency and still remain as National Assembly members? Well, you should do your research. Ask the question later. Go back and see whether there is any law forbidding people from holding position in National Assembly and running for the presidency. And also find out whether it has happened before or not. Then in the next press conference, you can tell me the facts and ask me.
I'm not asking, I'm just asking for clarification.
Well, clarification means that I am still a National Assembly member. I'm still a National Assembly member.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, please? Does anyone have questions? Okay. Well, did you want to give closing remarks?
Well, I don't think closing remarks would be necessary, except to say that we will have the same sessions to clarify matters to the Gambian population in our local languages so that everything said here would actually be said in the languages that the people do understand. Li nga xam ne wéral nañ ko ci suñ biir wax ji ak nit ñi mooy ne ñaari néeg moo nekk ci réew mi